This is the E-commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-commerce Edge podcast with me, Jason Greenwood, your host. It is my pleasure to welcome SHAAN ARORA to the podcast, and he is from Alia. It's on his LinkedIn. It says Alia Technologies, but he instructed me drop the Alia Technologies bit, the technologies bit, because we're now just called Alia, and he is the co-founder and CEO of Alia. So welcome to the podcast, SHAAN.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. And you're based in the amazing, crazy, wild city of New York, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I was explaining to you off air about a month or so ago. My wife and I were in New York for the very, very first time, and we were there for a conference. But then we also spent a couple of extra days in New York, sort of touring around, trying to see as much of New York as we could in a couple of days, and went down to Wall Street and did the financial district and the Bull and everything else down there. But yeah, man, New York feels a little bit. I almost think of it as an edgier, grittier, maybe slightly dirtier version of Chicago. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah.
But it's definitely pretty fast paced.
Yeah, that's fair. I grew up in Boston, so I think like it's also been compared in a similar way from Chicago to Boston, like, yeah, in that realm. So totally agree.
Wild, wild, good stuff. Listen, we're going to have a great conversation today about Alia and what you guys do. You call yourself the next generation of pop-ups for Shopify stores. And before we get into that, and before we get into what you do and how you do it, how did you come to be in this tech world? How did you come to be in this e-commerce world specifically? You were an AI engineering intern at Harvard Medical School. You were a hedge fund quant analyst intern with multiple firms, Credit Suisse, Crestline. You were also a software engineering intern at Wellframe. Look, you've got this tech bro, finance bro background, and then you pivoted into e-com 2.5 years ago. What the heck happened?
Yeah, it's a good question. I started the company when I was in college about 2.5 years ago. And I didn't really have any networks in e-commerce, nor really knew exactly what it was going to be like, but we decided that we could build something cool in this industry. So yeah, it was me and my co-founder, one of my co-founders at that time in college, and we launched what we're doing now, which is pop-ups in e-commerce, making pop-ups essentially better. At that time, we decided to go all in on this one thing without really having any experience in the industry, but we were just like, we believe we can fight and be determined enough to win in this industry that we can see it through. So that's what we did. Happy to go into more nuances of it, but yeah, since 2.5 years ago, we had 2 customers. We had about $0 in the bank, and now we have 2,700 customers and at 6.5 million ARR, fully bootstrapped the company. Yeah, it's been a fun journey.
Wow, that's wild. Those are wild numbers, especially to be bootstrapped. I don't think I know too many app developers, app vendors that are fully bootstrapped and have gotten to the level you guys are at. Why pop-ups? If I was to log into the Shopify App Store today and search the term pop-up or interstitial or something like that, or anything around what you do, I'd probably get 100 results. And so it's definitely, whether it's post-purchase pop-ups, whether it's pre-purchase pop-ups, whether it's entry, exit intent pop-ups, there's a million different approaches to this thing that people have taken wildly varying strategic and tactical approaches to the idea of a pop-up. Why did you guys decide, hey, let's go into the red ocean area space of pop-ups and make them better?
Yeah, it's a good question. And what we saw firstly is that almost every single e-commerce brand has one. With loyalty programs, with mobile apps, with other tech you can sell to e-commerce brands, you first need to convince them that it's a worthwhile endeavor to even test out using it, right? With a pop-up, there's 4 million brands on Shopify, like more than half use pop-ups already. We don't need to convince people that they are important. The biggest brands in the world use pop-ups too. Thinking about Target, Walmart, Equinox, Lifetime, like Best Buy, they all have a pop-up on their site. And most of them are not good, right? So yes, there are a lot of people who have tried to build a good pop-up tool or they sell a pop-up tool, but we didn't believe any of them were actually good. When you have a bunch of stores that already use one and they find it important enough to keep it on their store, but they don't find it important enough to really make it optimized, that's where we thought we could find gold. And I think our hypothesis has held true, and we still believe there's a lot more to be discovered inside of pop-ups. Pretty much all the other competitors in the market have stopped at a certain level in terms of product innovation for pop-ups, in my opinion. Like they might have reached a certain revenue number or a certain client's number or whatever, and then they were just like, okay, like this is fine. Like, this is enough. Whereas I'm 24, we build product extremely quickly. We're a tactical team. We're a product focused team. So like we believe we can push the boundary a lot more than other pop-up tools have done in the past. I think pop-up tools have gone to a certain point and have stopped innovating. I believe we're already ahead of people who have stopped, and we can keep getting miles and miles ahead of anyone else who even wants to continue to innovate in the space.
And what do you think, if you were to pick 1, 2, 3 things that you think make your technology stand out, unique, special, cutting edge, apart from the pace of innovation, what are like the current features and functions that you think, hey, we just do this better and we just do this better. Here's the how and here's the why about our product.
Yeah, it's a great question, right? And I think like at a meta level is that we just do this one thing, which is pop-ups, right? And Klaviyo, PostShift, Omnis, and they're all fantastic. We're partnered with all of them. They all have their own pop-up tool, but they also do email and SMS, which is their bread and butter. Other players in our space too have a pop-up tool, but it's not like their world. So at a meta level, this is our entire world. And that by itself is a big differentiator, we believe, for us. So that's what we think at a meta level. And then at a more nuanced level, one thing is called smart triggering, right? I'm sure when you see a pop-up or when most people see a pop-up, they click on X right away because they're just like, oh, let's get this out of my face. Totally fair. However, you should actually show that pop-up again for a second time, right? So let's say you see the pop-ups, you click X right away, but 30 seconds later, 45 seconds later, or a minute later, when you've been on the site for longer, you've gone to a product page, you've checked out XYZ, we'll show the pop-up again. So this idea of smart triggering, right? How can we show it again? So that's one big thing. Another one is smart testing. Think about, hey, you as an e-commerce brand owner have a million things to do, and running tests on your pop-up is not, might not even be on that list, or might be at the very bottom. Because, it's just a pop-up. Like, why would I run tests? Who cares? And that's fair, but if you can have the tests automatically run for you, you'd probably people want a client to run those tests, which is what we do. With smart testing, essentially, like it runs tests automatically for our brands using AI, which we think is super cool. And it'll essentially run a pop-up test, end the test, start a new one, end it, start a new one, and keep going in cycles like that. And the pop-up gets fully optimized by itself.
And it feels like also that not only do you have the smart testing, you've got the smart triggering based on, I guess I can define what I want to trigger a specific pop-up to a specific customer. Maybe it's when they land on a specific category. Maybe it's when they land on a specific PDP. But then you've got this internalized smart triggering technology, which I guess it's a combination of your proprietary data model combined with user behavior. And then you have the analytics piece, which I think is, to me, probably, if we look at the greatest marketing automation or CDP platforms on the planet right now, a big portion of what makes them great is their segmentation capability, right? It's their deep dive into the data of a specific user, visitor, customer. And obviously, if they start out as an unknown account, then they become an unknown account, then be able to merge that data, that behavioral data together in a meaningful way to be able to, obviously, we've all heard in the marketing world that a segment of one is the perfect segment, right? It's the perfect segment size. Now, most brands don't ever get down to segments of one because it's damn hard to do. And so therefore they create buckets of consumers that take similar behaviors or are of a similar demographic or are a similar user type. And then they try to market to those on very much a one-to-many basis, right? But obviously, the closer we can get to one-to-one, the more personalized we're able to be, the more, I guess, empathetic we're able to be to that user, and the more targeted we're able to be in terms of what we're trying to incent them to do. And do you feel that is where you guys either are at today or where you want to get to, where we want to be building segments of one ideally?
Yeah, it's a great question. Totally think that is where we are going towards. Like, I think most software companies believe like the one-to-one relationships is going to be the future, and we're in the same boat, right? I should see a different pop-up than you should see, right? That's simplified down to we should not see the same thing when we go to a site. And that's because we are different people. We have different shopping habits. Like, we probably wouldn't react the same to the same pop-up. So yeah, it's something we care a lot about. I think most software companies that are trying to be revolutionary are doing that exact thing.
And one of the big challenges I hear from the market, or at least I used to hear when I was working primarily in the retail space, was that, look, we have such a challenge making creative that is able to be deployed on a one-to-one basis. The sheer volume of paid and performance marketing creative, ad creative, video creative, push notification creative, email marketing creative, all the creative needs of all of these different channels is just wild. And then when you take into account social creative, the Instagrams, the TikToks, everything else, it gets pretty overwhelming for brands. And even with something like, a Nosto or some of the search merchant personalization platforms that are out there, for those individual placements, they also require a pretty significant volume of creative to be able to create the differentiated experience that these brands want to create. So it's a heavy lift for brands. And so
Yeah.
how do you help brands deal with the fact that, hey, if I want to get super granular with my pop-ups, and if I want to have 100 different pop-ups for 100 different segments and 100 different use cases and scenarios on the website and different page types, different experience moments, different cart compositions, different abandoned scenarios, different exit intent scenarios, etc., I'm going to need a lot of creative. So how do you help brands deal with that flood of demand for creative? Or is it something where I can just upload my template and then you generate the text that goes within that template, for example, dynamically based on the scenario?
Yeah, it's a good question. And like what we've seen, and we work with really large brands such as like Comfort, Peloton, Nike Strength, Aviator Nation, Hexclad, Caraway, Portland Leather Goods, like a bunch of really large brands. And
Wow,
we're just
Portland Leather Goods. I've been watching Curtis very closely on LinkedIn. He's become a superstar on LinkedIn almost overnight.
Yeah. So yeah, we work with his brand and a bunch of other 8-9 figure brands, which is cool. So what we've seen is the creative does matter, but oftentimes like the actual text, the segmentation, the targeting they are more important than simply the creative itself. So, and those things are typically easier to change than the creative. So let's say we want to have a bunch of different pop-ups, like 15 different pop-ups for each different landing page. Like it's actually pretty easy for us to make sure that the wording on the pop-up is correct or the offer is correct. If you want to give a 10% offer on a landing page from Instagram and a 20% offer on a landing page from Google, like you can do that pretty easily inside of what we do. And we've seen the alpha typically comes from the copy and the offer and less so of the creative itself.
And how much does integration with other systems, whether it be sending your data out to other systems like a Klaviyo, whatever, like a CDP, whatever, versus maybe gathering information from other systems that gather information that you do not, so that you have a much broader picture of this customer other than here's this anonymous user, here's the IP address we've tracked, or here's the UID we tracked, or here's the authenticated email address we've tracked, or whatever it is. And therefore now we have this limited view of all of the behavior of this customer. Maybe we've even tracked their purchase history, their abandon history, etc. So we know something about them, but we don't know everything about them. And there are other technologies in the stack that if we were to share data back and forth with them would give our app superpowers. Is that how you think about it too? That, hey, we don't want to be a purely walled garden here. We want to share data, but we also want to collect data from other platforms.
Yeah, it's a great question. Definitely something we do, right? Like we pass in pretty much all the data that we collect, mainly being the opt-in data. Mainly it's the opt-in data and like any zero-party data that we collect as well. We'll pass that into Klaviyo, PostScript, Omnisend, like all the ESPs pretty much. We'll pass that into, which gives them the ability to make sure those customers are getting the right emails. So that's like typically how we do integrations going out, and then coming in. Klaviyo is probably our largest integration partner where most of our brands come from. So let's say they already were running a pop-up in Klaviyo, which most brands are usually running in Klaviyo or equivalent. We can take in the lists and segments that they already have made and make sure we're not showing it to specific customers in those lists. let's say they have a list of existing customers in Klaviyo. In Alia, we can actually ensure that we're maintaining congruency from the people who we're not seeing or who were seeing the pop-ups in Klaviyo inside of Alia. And we find that to be extremely helpful. And that's probably the main way that we intake data, I'd say, is like through Klaviyo, seeing what lists and segments they have been using, and then making sure those are the same inside of our platform.
And are you a little bit like the email marketing platforms in that marketing platforms like Klaviyo, marketing automation platforms, CDPs, etc., they want to own all email communications, including transactional communications, right? Like in a perfect world. Now, sometimes they can't, sometimes they won't, sometimes the brand doesn't want them to, whatever the case may be. And so obviously, if you want to have a holistic view of email performance, you need one platform sending every single email that goes to your customers. If you want to have a holistic view of interaction with pop-ups, you need one platform triggering and managing the pop-ups. Now, we have pop-ups being driven by many different use case scenarios on our websites today. We have cookie pop-ups, we have push notification pop-ups, we've got out of stock notifications. We've got a million different pop-up types, right? That are not just marketing pop-ups. They're like what I would consider more like a transactional type of a pop-up, right? But if we want to understand how someone interacts with pop-ups and we want to leverage that as part of our full pop-up strategy, then it feels like the best idea would be to have Alia own all of our pop-ups and all of our on-site messaging that is fleeting or temporary, whether that be a conversion bar at the top and it's temporary and then it expands and it contracts, whether it be something that pops up in the footer temporarily and under certain conditions, whether it be there's a number of different ways. The world has moved on from just this pop-up that takes over the whole page. Like we've moved beyond that, right? And so there are many different pop-ups that have to work in many different scenarios. And especially with agentic commerce and the concierge model of buying and selling, now it feels like more than ever, pop-ups have to do more heavy lifting than they had to do in the past. They're expected to do more heavy lifting than they were in the past. Is that something that you guys already are thinking about and you want to own? Okay, if there is a pop-up message that needs to be triggered on this website, we want to own it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And I think there's probably two ways that you can think about building a company in the space. One is, as you mentioned, let's say owning all the pop-ups. And really, there's not too many. Like the cookie consent one, that's true. That's there. The banners, those are typically, they can be through pop-ups or they can be through like other apps. There's that route of like owning those, or the second route is like lead capture, right? So like, how can you go extremely deep into lead capture and build the best lead capture tool? So like you can go outside of pop-ups and retention.com, for example, like how they do lead capture, right? So you could also go down that route too. And for us, we haven't had to make that choice as to which one we believe we want to go into, right? Customers use our pop-ups for lead capture 95% of the time. It's like, hey, I want more emails. And then we're able to get them more emails. Now, the rest of it being cookie consent and stuff like that, it's not something we really tapped into. It's something we have the ability to do, but most brands already have a system for that, and they seem okay with that system being siloed from the email opt-in tool.
Sure. So your focus is like 90% on building an email list.
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, exactly.
Amazing. Amazing. And what do you feel how did you guys nail go to market in such a crowded space when there was already technology out there doing something similar to what you're doing? Maybe not exactly the same way you're doing it, obviously. How did you make yourself stand out in such a red ocean market when you haven't been doing this that long, right? You did less than 3 years. You've been working on this and you've landed some pretty serious brands with a serious cachet of credibility and trust. And these are big, these are not small. These are household brands. A lot of the brands that you work with. How did you cut through the noise of the Shopify ecosystem overall to get your product in front of more brands to give them the opportunity to level up their pop-ups?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think the way in which we've found the most success is simply by having good product and caring a lot about service, right? And of course, there's other growth hacks, like good stuff on Reddit, on SEO, outbound, whatever it might be. We haven't really touched most of that. We've just believed that by having a phenomenal product that is better than what's out there, by having really good service, we can win the market. So that's like the thesis. And then the way in which it's actually happened is through agency partnerships. Retention agencies, a lot of times they'll actually service the pop-up for their clients. And then they will recommend to their clients that they use us, and the client will use us, and the client's happy, and then the agency partner sends over more referrals. So that's been, I think, our biggest growth lever has been that agency partnership relationship. So I'd say on a monthly basis, about 60% of our revenue comes from our agency partners.
And what percentage, now you don't have to give me exact numbers because it's probably proprietary information, but roughly what percentage of your customers come from some other pop-up platform versus, hey, this is the first time they've ever done pop-ups. They come to you and they're going, hey, we don't really have a pop-up strategy here. Can you help us? Versus, hey, we've been running this other thing over here, this other standalone pop-up platform or something on Klaviyo or something basic with, I don't know, maybe they're running Yotpo and they're using some sort of a pop-up thing out of Yotpo or something like that.
Sure.
What percentage of them are coming to you to do pop-ups right from day one versus, hey, we found some limitations in what we're doing today and we need something better and that's why we found you?
So it's 99% of them have used a pop-up before.
Wow. That's surprising. I thought it would be more like
really?
maybe 50-50 because it feels like there's still a lot of websites that don't have a pop-up strategy.
Yeah, maybe those are some smaller sites. Not even a strategy. They've just, but if you're asking like how many people have were using a pop-up before,
Yep.
it's not that. And it's because our pricing starts at $100 a month. So naturally we're boxing out stores that do less than 20K a month in revenue.
Yep.
Stores that do above 15, 20K in revenue always will have a pop, but 99% of the time.
And what are the improvements, like on average? Obviously, there's going to, how long is a piece of string? Some are going to do super well. Some are going to do average. Some are going to do less than average. What do they usually find if they move from an old system? I don't know. Let's say they're using Klaviyo pop-ups or something like that. What is the increase in their opt-in rate that they would typically see when they make the switch to your platform because of the smart triggering, the smart segmentation, all the stuff that you do that most of these other platforms don't do at all, or they don't do to the level you do it at? And they certainly don't have automated testing. Typically, you can create sort of ABM testing, but you've got to manually create those tests. So there's not a lot of tests running all the time. What sort of increase in opt-in rates is typical for clients that make the move to your platform?
Yeah, it's typically a 2x increase.
Wow, a 2x increase.
Yeah,
wow,
2x
that's incredible. So wow, that's quite a significant lift in opt-in rates.
We offer 30 days free, so brands can test it out and see whether or not it's able to have that increase, and usually it does.
Nice. And what's on your radar? What, if you were to look out 6, 12, 18 months, what does, Alia not do today that either you say, we want to do this because we see a gap in the market and we're working on this and 6 months from now, we're going to be doing this? Or is there anything specifically that your customers are asking you for that you don't yet do, that you go, hey, look, guys, stick with Alia because we don't do that today, but in 6, 12, 18 months, we will be?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the greatest strengths for any company is ignoring certain things, right? I think companies who want to do everything end up being the least successful because their customers don't know who they are. So what you said, right? What do you not want to be doing in 6 to 12 months is what I care about. Do we want to ignore? There's a ton of noise, and especially in the AI space, it's getting easier and easier to build products every day. So it's, oh yeah, of course you can add in this and you can add in this and add in that. But if you add in a bunch of things that are not actually helpful to the core product, what's your identity in the market? And I care about having a strong identity of being phenomenal at pop-ups and not doing anything else. And we believe the market is big enough and there's enough demand to maintain this position of let's be phenomenal at pop-ups and not touch anything else. And that's where I see the future of the next 6 to 12 months is creating a bigger and bigger divide in terms of product from us and the closest competitor. Now, that's probably going to your point, like one-to-one relationships, right? Like how can you serve we say like serving the right pop-up to the right customer at the right time, right? Creating those one-to-one relationships and making it really easy for brands to just flip it on and they're good all set. So I'd say that's where I see the future in the next year.
Nice. And in terms of getting up and running on the platform, I'm guessing it's as simple as installing the app. It probably installs a small piece of JavaScript on the website, and then you have your control panel where you can control the rules, and you can. I'm guessing that it's probably a 5-minute affair to get up and running, and then maybe an extra hour to configure. And I'm guessing it's mostly plug and play.
Yeah, that's accurate. We're a Shopify app, so we try to make it pretty easy for folks to try it out.
Nice, nice. And when you look out across the market, are there other completely separate platforms that you want to build outside of pop-ups? You want to build, okay, cool, I want to build this other app that does this other thing. I don't want to pollute Alia with this. I don't want to have feature bloat just for the sake of feature bloat, or I don't want to have AI just for the sake of AI and Alia, but I want to build this other thing. I see a similar gap in this other area that I saw in the pop-up space when we started Alia, and we want to do this other thing, but completely independent of Alia. Are there other ideas on the boil behind the scenes?
Honestly, there's none.
Yeah.
I have immense focus on this, and I don't care about anything else.
I love it. Niching down is a superpower. I couldn't agree more. That's what I've done in my own consultancy. I've niched down on B2B, and I've just gone deep in the paint
Nice.
on the B2B space. And I think we've added some adjacency services, but they're all focused on B2B. In the beginning, we only worked with manufacturers and distributors, for example. Then we started working with SIs and platform vendors and investors, but all working in the B2B e-commerce space. And so I think there is a special superpower that comes along with niching down that really pays massive dividends and going deep on a subject instead of trying to be all things to all people, which we know is impossible anyway. So why try? Listen, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you? I'll drop a link to your profile as well, your LinkedIn profile, as well as your website in the show notes. Other than that, how do you like people to get a hold of you and talk about pop-ups?
Yeah, LinkedIn is great. It's just my first and last name on LinkedIn, and then I post on Instagram as well. So my Instagram is SHAAN ARORA 19, first last name, and then number 19. So I've been posting on there once every weekday, and yeah, trying to get more active on Instagram too.
Nice, nice. I like it. If there was one thing you could change about our industry in e-commerce, just at the snap of your fingers, what would it be?
Finding a way to make the profit margins higher for e-commerce brands.
Yeah, I hear that. So, yeah, those margins are tough. But man, I tell you, if retail e-commerce thinks the margins are tough, try coming into the B2B world where net margins are oftentimes around 3%. Yeah, retail e-commerce is doing a lot better than B2B, that's for sure. But no, I agree. Obviously, B2B is doing scale, doing volumes that retail e-commerce typically aren't doing. And yeah, most brands would love to start at like at least 75% gross margins in retail.
Yeah.
Be able to come up with an end with a 25 to 30% net margin if they're lucky. Yeah, it's a tough game out there. It's a tough game out there, right? I couldn't agree more. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to turn the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question, any question you like. It could be personal or professional. Mr. SHAAN ARORA from Alia, what is your question for me today?
What is your favorite quote?
What is my favorite quote? Wow, what a great question. I've heard a lot of great quotes over the years. I don't think I have one off the top of my head that I would go, this is an amazing quote. There's one from Dave Ramsey, which he says, debt is normal, be weird. And I really love that quote because I've always, for my whole life, I'm 50 years old now, I've always had a paranoid aversion to debt. I just don't like it. I don't like credit card debt. I don't like car debt. I don't like mortgage debt. I've just tried to stay out of debt for my entire life. And I've always loved that quote from him, which is, debt is normal, be weird. And I really respect that.
That's a good one. I think my favorite quote is, he who jumps into the void owes no explanation to those who stand and watch.
Oh, wow. I love that one. I've always been a bit of a contrarian myself. So I'm gonna figure out who said that, and I'm gonna look into that because there's probably more goodness wherever that came from. So I love it. Yeah, no, it's very cool. I followed Ayn Rand for a long time as well, and I really like Who is John Galt and anything that kind of relates to free market capitalism and laissez-faire capitalism and being an independent thinker. Anything that kind of leans in that direction has been inspirational for me over the years. Very cool. Listen, Shaan, this has been a fabulous conversation. I appreciate your time, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Have a great day. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.